Let me start by thanking everyone for coming out. We are being videoed. I don't know where it's going to show up, just so you know. But in all seriousness, I'm not going to prattle on all that long, but I do want to give members of the community and leaders in the city the opportunity to understand where the university is now, particularly in the context of talking with the legislature. I mean, in a few short weeks, the real serious work on the budget will start. We have a lot of skin in the game this year in a lot of ways, and so I want to make sure that all of you have the ammunition you need to make the case, whoever asks you, why it's important to invest in the University of Wisconsin-Platteville. So, let's start here. You know, 150 years, that's one of the great things about this year. We're in the midst of celebrating 150 years of our delivering affordable, high-quality education to the citizens of Wisconsin and beyond. Most everyone here knows the colleges that we have in place, and that we have more than 130 academic programs. It's always important sort of understand how other people view you, and a lot of institutions use the U.S. News and World Report, which is mostly a beauty contest. Well, these folks are looking at the investment students make in their education and what they're making when they leave college. Now, no doubt that is driven in large part because of our engineers who are well paid when they leave here. But it shows that in the state of Wisconsin, we rank #1 in the terms of return on investment. Best value, again, using good metrics to assess us relative to other people by smart asset. Okay, and there are a lot of other good things, and it would be difficult for me, we'd be here all night if I tried to describe all the great things that are happening on campus. But at a national level, our women in engineering program received an ABET. ABET is the engineering accrediting agency. If you're not ABET accredited, you're not an engineering school. And so we won because of our very good work by a number of people on our campus of increasing the number of women that are becoming engineers. So what's happening on campus? So it's always important to know what enrollment is. You see we're a couple hundred students short of 8,000 in our undergraduate program, and that's what we primarily are as an undergraduate institution, and about 900 graduate students. We've been fortunate in many ways with the growth in enrollment, you know, both with in-state students. You may not know that there are more Wisconsin residents attending Platteville now than at any time in its history. And with the Tri-State program. And the Tri-State program, which had about 600 students in it when I got here, now has about 1,600 students. Now, how does that impact our campus? That's approximately $16 million in revenue. That $16 million that goes directly against our operating budget is more than we get from the state for our operating budget. So you can imagine the shape we'd be in if we hadn't had the foresight that Chancellor Marquis had to develop that program, and the good efforts of our enrollment staff to really pitch it to students in Illinois and Iowa. We spent through last summer going through a year-and-a-half process of adjusting as a result of the budget cuts that were made in this biennium. About $3 million in ongoing cuts, and then a $5 million structural deficit that was a result of flattening tuition that we built into the budget, which was fairly modest, our projections there. But as a result, we've shrunk the senior team. We have 4 senior leaders. University Relations, run by Rose Smirsky, which is development, alumni affairs, communications, et cetera. In fact, it's she and her staff that have put together this program and supervised me so I make a reasonable presentation. Enrollment and student success, which is also student affairs, residence life, student organizations, et cetera, under Angela Udelhoven. Academic Affairs, which is central to our mission. It's being run right now by Interim Provost Liz Troop. And Administrative Services, which has been run by Rob Kramer. Let me just say a couple of things about Rob. And I think most of you probably know Rob or have interacted with him. When I arrived here as a rookie chancellor almost 7 years ago, the thing I worried most about was the money and the fiscal plan of the institution, but mostly the money. And I sat down with Rob, and in the first few minutes I had some confidence that that would go well. And it's not so much that he served me well, but I think he served the campus well. There's been a great deal more transparency about the budget, a lot more thought put into it, and he has led in a very impressive way. He will be missed, I think, both at the university and in this community. Now, the upside of that, he's gone on to a great opportunity. And I think it bodes well for the system that someone like him, who spent so much time on campus, is finally sitting in one of the senior level chairs there at system headquarters. Tomorrow, I'll be announcing an interim choice, and we'll decide in the next few months how to proceed with a search for a permanent replacement. We will do a national search. Where are we? Our budget, if you take out, now this is not all the money that flows to the university, but it takes out the pass-through money, the federal aid that sort of passes through our hands and goes to students and some other piece of budget. When I arrived in 2010, that dollar figure minus the pass-through money was closer to $145 million. So there's been a tangible decrease in amount of funding that we have available. And tuition is the largest piece of that. Like all public institutions, because of the slackening support from states all over the country in higher education, our public institutions are becoming more and more tuition driven. Now, I could spend a lot of time bemoaning that fact, but it's the reality, and we have to figure out how to control our own destiny. Now, I'll make a couple other points with this. 8,000 undergraduates is the number. We're not going to be growing much. It's going to be a hustle just to maintain our enrollment where it is. Why is that? Because the demographics in Wisconsin, and yes, the whole upper Midwest, the traditional college-age, high school graduate population demographic is getting smaller, and it's going to continue to get smaller. So we're going to have our hands full maintaining 8,000 undergraduate enrollment. No one would be more surprised than us if enrollment goes up than me. So, but that's the target. We get to that level. Now, the couple ways we could do that, that's also the influx of new students, but it's also a function of doing a bit better retaining the students that we have. We have a fairly good retention rate in the grander scheme of things. Our retention from freshman year to sophomore year has hovered about 75 to 77% for quite some time, even though it's been the focus. So we have to get better at that. But if we can raise that retention to about 80%, 81 or 82%, it will help us maintain this enrollment. A couple of things we're doing. We're in the process of developing a new budget model. Now, this institution, like many institutions, has engaged in sort of incremental budgeting. And by that I mean they look at what you got last year, they decide whether or not you get more or you get less, and depending on other factors, what the state provides, et cetera. We're in the process of developing a budget model where the dollars follow the students. And that will enable us to be much more strategic about our resources. With Rob's departure, we're going to slow down the implementation of that, but what we're doing is we're going to run that budget as a shadow of the actual budget so we see what the impacts are. We don't want to shoot ourselves in the foot in our haste to get to a new budget model. Campus climate. One of the things I'm proudest about since I've been here is that we've increased the number of students of color on this campus. We've increased the number of international students. But more importantly, we've increased the academic achievement of those students. When I arrived here, it was a mess. Right now, our students of color, are achieving at nearly the same pace as the overall student population. That is a remarkable feat. And Angela Miller, who's sitting here, has run the Office of Multicultural Student Affairs for the last 5 years. Took my advice and said, we're going to focus these students on academic achievement. The other thing I'm real proud about is that they're distributed across our majors now. They used to all be sort of sitting in one major. Now we see them in engineering and biology and business, et cetera. But as well as we've done at that, we still have challenges with the climate. We want not agreement across the campus, but the ability to get along with one another and to have civil discourse even when there's disagreements. Now, I get this because believe it or not, I get a little flack sometimes. But it's different for students and faculty, particularly freshmen, sophomores, and untenured faculty. A few weeks ago, somebody pulled up in the driveway. I wasn't there. My wife was there, pulled their pickup truck up there, and played Dixie for her. Since the election, I've gotten 6 or 7 pieces of mail encouraging me to leave the state or wishing me a white Christmas. Now, that's not a big deal for me. I wouldn't be standing here in front of you today if those kinds of things were going to bother me. But you think about somebody who's new to this community, somebody who's starting their career, and think about the impact it has on them. So as much as people wonder about whether or not we ought to be engaging in this campus climate stuff, it is important to have the kind of university that we have. So we're going to be pivoting. We're still going to maintain the efforts that we make to have our students be successful, but we're going to be much more intentional about creating an atmosphere where everyone feels welcome. Data, data, data. Both the next two things have to do with that. You know, if we're going to achieve our goals with retention and graduation rate and time to graduation are the ways that a lot of our external constituencies, the legislature and others, are going to be measuring us. We need to improve that, but we also need to use data to help us understand how we can improve that. And so we've engaged EAB to help us get our data act together. I'm very intentional about this. I think what we do ought to be data informed. A lot of people like to use the term data driven, but we have other values and other concerns that are important to us, and so we don't want the data always to make the decision, but it should help inform the decision. Now, our focus is on students and student outcomes, and so let me give you one example of how data can be helpful. So about 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago, the Hope Lab from the School of Education up in Madison wanted us to participate in the study of low-income students on our campus. And in fact, they were doing a comparison with other campuses in the system and a few private schools to see what the nature and quality of the experience of low-income students was on campus. One of the things they discovered is that many of our low-income students weren't eating well and were not utilizing the meal plan appropriately. So, you know, I said, well, they have to eat. That's going to affect the nature of their experience and whether or not they graduate. So let's figure that out. Mike Ernst, who runs our food service, does a fabulous job, started putting together plans. And then in the course of talking to him, he said, you know, we actually know the students whose meal plans are running out. And we email them. So we're doing the right thing. He had the data that says we know the ones that are in trouble, and we have a plan to help supplement their meal plan so that they can eat through the end of the semester. But they weren't responding to the emails. I suspect because they thought they were going to get hit up to pay more. Well, if we have that data, we got to get it in the hands of people who can influence the students and let them know that what we want to do is help them, not bill them. So that's an example of the kind of data that might have an impact. There's a number of things that impact student experience, right? You know, it's not just what happens in the classroom. That's the core of what they do. But because many of our students come from modest means, many of them have to work a substantial amount of time. There are a number of things that impact whether or not they matriculate to graduation in 4 years as opposed to 5 or 6 years. For example, they're working, they have a car, the car breaks down. It's going to be $300 or $400 to fix the car. Do they drop a class so they can work more? Do they work more and not drop the class and then not do well? We need to know those kinds of things. We're setting aside financial aid dollars to help them over that hump. But we also have to be in a position that we're aware of those sorts of challenges. Some of them have mental health challenges, some of them have family challenges. We want them to engage in what we call high impact practices. A good example is the soils team, which is extraordinarily successful. Their engagement in the soils team, their engagement in undergraduate research is really important. But since 30 to 40% of our students are first generation college students, they may not be aware of how important those opportunities are. So we have to develop a platform that helps them from the start of their journey to the end, and we have to be more intentional about that. A lot of that that will help us get that done is intentionally gathering the data. I'll give you another example. We now have an early warning system for freshmen. We know in the first couple of weeks who didn't go to class, who didn't pass the first quiz. We can reach out to them, bring them in, and keep them on track early on. So those are kind of intentional things that we're doing to help us be successful. All this goes to the pillars of our strategic plan. Providing outstanding education, which is, it's at the top, and it's at the top for a reason. That's central to what our mission is about. Controlling our own destiny, understanding that if we sit around and wait for the state to rescue us, not that the state doesn't have an obligation and we won't make that case, we have to be doing the kinds of things that help us be successful. Enriching the tri-states. If you're here tonight, you know that we add value to this community with the arts, with the opportunity for young people on our campus, with the tourists and others that we bring to town. But there's so many ways we can do that. So that's one of the things. And then that goes to campus climate, fostering a community of achievement and respect. So let's talk a little bit about the budget. So the regents of the system have put forward a request for $42.5 million additional funding. And that's I think it's a fairly modest sum. That sounds like a lot of money. It's not really. If they distribute that in the way they typically have, that means anywhere from $700,000 to $1 million for us. Okay. The other piece is we also lapsed about $25 million that we didn't get to spend in this biennium that's supposed to be built into the coming biennium. Right now in our budget model, we haven't built that lapse money in, but my argument is that we ought to assume that's going to be there. That would be a net positive. So we're asking for an investment in higher education and investment in the University of Wisconsin-Platteville. What do we want them to invest in? We want them to invest in students. We want them to invest in the talent that we have here. Our faculty and staff are the ones that educate our students and get them through the process. I'm the chancellor. I'm not in the classroom day to day. I'm not dealing with students on an ongoing basis. If we are going to be successful as a university, we have to be able to retain the talent that we have. We have to be able to attract new talent. And we have to be able to develop the talent we have. And we need to invest in infrastructure. There are so many, there's so much deferred maintenance on the campus. I could give you a headache if I walked you through all of that. But we need to fix a couple of things, and so I'm going to talk a little bit about the investment. Just to paint the picture for you, the blue line is the money we generate as a university. And you can see it's going up. So it's approaching 80% of our budget is coming from money we generate. Tuition, student fees, auxiliaries, et cetera. The red line is the investment the state's been making. That's been declining. I think the next two charts put this in stark contrast. So if you go back to 2001, well before I was here, about 40% of our budget came from the state, our operating budget each year, and 60% of it was self-generating. This is what it looks like now. It's down to 11% in our operating budget. So we're asking the state to reverse that trend by making a bit more of an investment in the University of Wisconsin-Platteville. So I know the governor's put out a plan to sort of say, let's cut tuition and let's backfill it with GPR. I think that's one approach. I don't necessarily say it's the wrong approach. The approach I think would be more effective would be investing more in need-based aid. There has not been an increase in investment in need-based aid in 8 years. So there are more students on need-based aid now and the same amount of money. So the grants are getting smaller. So to give you a picture of what that looks like, a full need student, we give them all the grants and scholarships we have available. We give them all the loans that we have available. They still have between a $5,000 and $6,000 shortfall in meeting their educational budget. That's why so many of them work. I think it's most important to help the people most in need, that most need the support, and so I would argue that we need to invest in more need-based aid so that we can reduce the amount of time they have to spend working and et cetera. Investing in talent. Why invest in the University of Wisconsin-Platteville? This is the economic impact that the University of Wisconsin has across the state annually, almost $400 million. This is how much of it has an impact in southwest Wisconsin and in Platteville. Every dollar that's invested by the state in this institution creates $13 of economic activity. If for no other reason, that's the reason to make that investment. And how does that pay off? Those faculty live in southwest Wisconsin and in Platteville. They buy food, they eat at restaurants, they buy gas, they shop downtown. That's where that investment pays off. So if we're going to attract and retain the incredible faculty and staff that we have to do something about that. I hope the pay plan goes through. The regents have proposed a 2% increase in the investment in pay over 2% the first year of the biennium and 2% the second biennium. That's not going to get us all the way to where we need to be, but it would be a major change from how it's been for the last 10 years. For Platteville, the other part of the argument that I'm making is that we're at the low end of that investment in faculty in the system. So part of the argument that I'm having with system is they need to, if they just do it across the board, that's going to widen the gap at Platteville versus other schools. So I'm asking them to make an additional investment so that we can attack that. Now, the other thing you should know, since I've been at Platteville, we have redirected up to $2 million annually towards compensation. The struggle with that is each year we have to do that strategically so it doesn't go across the board. So the pay plan that the regents are proposing would be more across the board. Now, what are we doing to help ourselves? Because I talk about controlling our own destiny. So we now have our first endowed professorship. That takes about $2 million. That was money raised and made available to us by the foundry industry. Because the foundry industry knows that the primary source of their skilled workforce that has bachelor's degrees comes from Platteville. And that students that go to school in Platteville and are in that program stay in Wisconsin and work at Waupaca, work at Neenah, work at Kohler, work at Falk. So they got together and put together this plan so they made sure that there was a key faculty member in place to continue that pipeline. They're doing it because it's a return on investment. All of those companies made an investment in this, fairly significant. I think Waupaca was $1 million in and of themselves. I heard Kohler was about $400,000. That's a tribute to Dr. Metzloff, to Dean Weber, and to me for staying out of the way and making sure that I didn't do anything to screw it up. Dr. Tara Montgomery developed and advocated for a dairy science program at the urging of business and industry. That's a program that those students who are in the dairy science program are going to pay a little bit of a premium to help support that program. But more importantly, two banks, local, Mound City Bank and I can't remember the other bank, that made a $50,000 contribution. And I got wind today that another entity is prepared to make a $50,000 contribution to help support this. These are the kind of things we're going to have to continue doing. On another front, a number of our faculty are engaging in research that's being supported by System. Chuck Cornett's here. His department, chemistry, is leading the way there. I think there are 3 or 4 faculty members that are 5 that are getting 5.
That have in the West.
Yeah. There are 12 of those made available every year, and we got 4 of them this year. That's another way. helping support our program. So we are doing the kinds of things that help us control our own destiny. Investing in infrastructure. There's not enough money in the state to do all the things that we need to do, but there are a couple of things that are on the front. So when I arrived here in 2010, we had just completed the first phase of Babel Hall, which is 3 floors. They just completed the renovation of that, with the understanding, and we did that with campus-based dollars, with the understanding the state would come in and finish that renovation. Now that houses our biology department. That's grown 300% over the past few years. These are the science, STEM students that are populating the workforce in Wisconsin. So it ties into this whole notion that we ought to be graduating people that will help advance the workforce in Wisconsin. That project's about $20 million. It is the top renovation project put forward by the Regents this year. Regents have already approved this moving forward. Babel was built in 1977, Phase 1, 2010. Sesquicentennial Hall. We are now housed, most of our engineering and chemistry too, are housed in Ottensman Hall, what was called Centennial Hall. It was built in the mid-60s. It serves 3,200 engineering students. I would imagine when it was built there weren't 3,200 students on the campus. We're producing 23% of the engineers that graduate from UW system. The engineers that come to school here overwhelmingly stay in state. They work at Kohler, they work for the Department of Transportation, they work up in the Green Bay area, and that's another point I want to make. The system came and looked at that building and told us we needed a new building. This is the only new construction that's been put forward by the Regents. We're getting a lot of support from our elected officials, Howard Markline, Travis Tranel, Todd Novak. That's the contingent from this region of the state. So I'm reasonably hopeful that this will make it through the legislature. The legislature will approve this. Most importantly, I don't know if any of you were here for Senator Markline's listening session. I think it's notable that members of the community, of this community and the business community, and not the university, were making the advocacy argument for the university. That's especially important for us moving forward. They need to hear from others. Now, investing in Platteville is investing in Wisconsin, and it's investing in Southwest Wisconsin. Now, these are a series of photos. I've spent the better part of the last year and a half visiting a number of communities in Southwest Wisconsin: Prairie du Chien, Lancaster, Fenimore, Dodgeville, and several others. When we make those visits to those campuses, we meet with the Chamber of Commerce, we meet with local elected officials, we visit with business. We visit at least 2 businesses at every stop, a small business and if there's a larger one. For a number of reasons. Number one, we need to know what their needs are. We need to understand how the university can help their communities be successful. For example, Fenimore, we discovered that they were having a number of retirements in their city administration. And the leadership said it would be a good time to review our business practices. So now we have a class led by a faculty member in our business school doing a hands-on project looking at their business practices and giving them some help figuring out how to make improvements and efficiencies. In other places, our engineers that help them design parking lots and that kind of thing. And we've gotten feedback on how other ways that we can be helpful to them. And we've reminded them that we're a significant contributor to the community. And the point is for them to reach out to their neighbors and to their elected officials and help make the case for supporting higher education in this state, and specifically UW-Platteville. This is our legislative contingent at various points: Howard Markline, Travis Tranel, Rebecca Kleefish, and Todd Novak. They've all been very engaged with the campus. I would guess if they're not here at least once a month, they're here every other month. I meet with them in the Capitol. They're very engaged, and very aware of what our needs are and are very supportive of it. Now, that's real important. Howard in particular has a very significant position in the Senate that can help move these things forward, and in fact moved a couple of things forward last biennium that were real helpful to us. So, and lastly, what can you do? You can do like the Chamber of Commerce here did in Platteville and write a letter to the governor and to people. You can contact legislators' office, and you can come attend the UW Day on April 12th. And that's a great opportunity, both to sort of interact with legislators, but also see the great research projects that our students are displaying there. It will give you some faith in what's happening in higher education to meet these students who are engaging in undergraduate research projects, many times somewhere in the community in southwest Wisconsin. It's very heartening. So